bienvenue. My name is Harvey Slack, and I'm a proud trustee of the Ottawa Public Library Board, and I'm so happy to be here with you this evening. Before we begin, it is important to acknowledge that even as we gather virtually, we are on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I would like to thank our partners in organizing this event, the Ottawa International Writers Festival and Library and Archives Canada. We are extremely lucky tonight to take part in the national launch of Burning Sugar by activist and poet Cicely Belle Blain. I look forward to this conversation on the legacy of colonialization, racism, and systematic oppression, and how the author used poetry to explore these challenging themes. I invite you to visit the Ottawa Public Library website to find out about some of the Ottawa's special library programming we have planned for Orange Shirt Day on September 30th, and to find out more about our fall speaker series on topics related to resiliency, starting with emotional resiliency and COVID, an intergenerational Indigenous approach by Juanique Horn-Miller. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Sean Wilson from the Ottawa International Writers Festival to say a few words. Thank you and have a great evening. Merci et bonne soirée.
Thank you so much, Harvey. I want to thank everyone in advance for not only joining us this evening, but also for supporting authors and booksellers through these difficult times. Our official bookseller is Perfect Books right here in Ottawa, but wherever you are right now, there is an independent bookseller nearby or online who would be more than happy to sell you a dozen copies of this amazing collection. If you enjoy this session, visit us at writersfestival.org to make a donation, sign up for upcoming events, or to enjoy our virtual season on demand. It's as simple as pressing play. We're here tonight to celebrate great writing, but more than just great writing. We're celebrating the power of community and solidarity. We're celebrating the simple notion that whatever power we have is best used to amplify others, that whatever gifts we receive, they are always most enjoyed when shared with others. VS Books was founded by artist Vivek Shraya in 2017 to create more intergenerational dialogue and support for artists of color. Each year, Vivek offers a mentorship opportunity for a writer who is Indigenous, Black, or a person of color, as well as a publishing contract under the VS Books imprint with Arsenal Pulp Press. Vivek is an artist whose body of work crosses the boundaries of music, poetry, fiction, visual art, and film. She's also a force for good in the world and an inspiration. It is my tremendous honor to introduce our host this evening, Vivek Shraya.
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you everyone who's joining us tonight. I really wish that we could be here or be with you in person in Ottawa. I always have such a wonderful time over there, and I'm just thinking about that beautiful space right now. So thank you to everyone that's joining us and everyone who's not in Ottawa tonight. My name is Vivek Shraya, and I'm an artist and an author. 10 years ago, I self-published my first book called God Loves Hair. This year, actually, we published a 10-year anniversary edition to commemorate that journey. And it's been such a journey because now 10 years later, I have the wonderful opportunity of also being a publisher. As Sean mentioned, in 2017, did I say that right? I approached Brian Lamb at Arsenal Pulp Press about having an imprint with the goal of mentoring and then publishing works by emerging BIPOC writers. And he said yes, and, which has been so wonderful. And last year, we published our first book under VS Books, Shut Up You're Pretty by Tea Matangi, which most recently won the Trillium Award in Ontario. Last year as well, I selected this year's book by Cicely Belle Blain. you know, when I was reading her manuscript after the open call, when I was reading their manuscript, I was really struck by the way that Cicely's book grappled with space, as actual cities and places, but also spaces like art galleries and spaces in human growth. I also had so much admiration for the work that they were doing in their community, and also on the page. As an educator, they really brought that energy to the page. And I found myself thinking, I really want to be part of this journey in some small way. I want to support their journey. I'm so honored that they submitted their manuscript to me and that they said yes to working with me. So before I bring on Cicely to join us for a conversation, I'm going to read their bio. I also want to flag that basically the trajectory of tonight is that Cicely's going to read for us, then Cicely and I are going to have a back and forth conversation, and then we're going to take your audience questions. So feel free, I think that in the Zoom or in Facebook, drop your audience questions and we will answer your questions for you. So without further ado, Cicely Belle Blain is a Black mixed queer femme. At the heart of all their work, Cicely Belle harnesses their passion for justice, liberation, and meaningful change via transformative education, always with laughter and fearlessly in the face of systemic oppression. They are noted for founding Black Lives Matter Vancouver and subsequently being listed as one of Vancouver's 50 most powerful people, BC Business's 30 under 30, and one of 150 Black women and non-binary people making change across Canada. They are now the CEO of Cicely Belle Consulting, social justice informed diversity and inclusion consulting company with over 200 clients across North America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Also, because that's not enough, Cicely Belle loves dinosaurs, Instagram, and YA fantasy. Everyone, Cicely Belle Blain.
Hi, thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's lovely to be here with you and with everybody who's out there as well. So this is Burning Sugar, and I would like to read a couple of pieces. And I was trying to decide, today I did my first Twitter residency with the publisher Arsenal Pulp Press, and I asked folks if there were any particular ones they'd like to hear read aloud. And I'm going to find one of those ones. I'm just going to read a small snippet of this. This piece is called Toronto. It's an essay, so I'm just going to read the first page of it, and then I guess as a teaser, and then leave you hanging, and you have to buy it to read the rest. Toronto. It's 3 a.m. and I'm sitting on a balcony at the corner of Dundas and Gladstone. The neighbors are playing late 80s alt rock and the air smells like smoke and chocolate. My rainbow platform sandals, half a joint, and a flag striped pink, white, blue lie around me like an altar to my queer liberation. Marsha P. Johnson is pinned in enamel to my lapel, brown skin and flower crown immortalized on my chest. A wind blows the pages of the Toronto Pride Guide open and closed like an accordion. Rainbows glitter and unicorns practically exult from the pages. I'm not usually that kind of queer, but tonight I am. I'm nursing a bruise on my left knee. The rainbow platform sandals got the better of me. My body aches with exhilaration, my toes twitching with memories of the dance floor. This is my 7th year as an openly queer person, and the first time I've enjoyed Pride. Toronto Pride engulfed me with as much ancestral power and depth as a glacial lake, in love, in community, in liberation, in Blackness, but most importantly, in anonymity. I felt what I've always desired, and I think, despite ridiculous rainbowy spectacles, what so many queers want to feel: invisible. I was just another rainbow-clad, brown-skinned, tattooed femme swaying off rhythm to scratchy megaphone music. I'd also like to read a piece which is kind of the inspiration behind the title of the book. So this piece is called North Carolina. Heat stretches out for miles, fields brown and crackling. I can feel the vibration of mosquitoes in my veins. It's my first time in the South. They laughed when I asked, what the heck is grits? My body gravitates towards the magnolia tree. It has always been my favorite. Pale yellow flowers reach upwards, undoing gravity. I am in the shade of the tree before I see it. The whipping post. It stands short and unassuming. I'm almost disappointed by how dull it is. A piece of wood struck jarringly into the earth, a slight eastward disposition. I expected inflictions of time, deep wounds of history, blood of my ancestors, a haunting chill, pain in my own fragmented heart, and the smell of burning sugar. Instead, it stands there in all its regularity and reticence, with no stories to share, as if all the violence of white supremacy would simply fade with time. And the last one I'll read for now is Dear Diaspora Child. It's okay if you only learned about your culture from Google. It's okay if you only read your language at the public library. It's okay if you need books to know your ancestral recipes. It's okay if you've never set foot on the soil of your people. It's okay if your hips don't sway to those rhythms, and it's okay if the food is too bitter for your tongue. It's okay if English is the only language that flows freely from your mouth. It's okay if your wardrobe is just jeans and tees. It's okay if you only know Shakespeare. It's okay if spice brings you fear instead of joy. It's okay if you can understand but not reply. It's okay if you dread the disappointed stares of aunties. It's okay if small words like salam alaikum fall from your tongue like broken bones. It's okay if you spent your whole life shunning it all only to now want it back. You are no less worthy. It is no less home. So I think I will leave that there for now, and then
Muted here. Oh, I'm unmuted now. Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, first of all, on behalf of the pandemic, I want to apologize to you that you get a Zoom launch instead of a real life launch. And I also sincerely want to thank you so much for the honor of working with you. I know I've thanked you so much already, but like just hearing you read just like again reminds me of why I fell in love with your manuscript. So thank you so much again for trusting me.
Thank you.
Are we ready for questions?
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So I'm very curious. Do you, let's go back to the beginning. I'm curious how you heard of the open call and like what made you submit, and if you already had a manuscript. And just sort of like what that process was for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I heard of the open call, how I hear about everything, through Twitter, and I thought it was such an amazing opportunity. I already had some kind of like, pieces of poems and essays and letters in random notebooks spread out across the globe, really. Really kind of saw that as kind of like a bit of a push to actually go for it and to submit something when I saw that opportunity. And I had submitted some things for publication previously, but had some rejections and was feeling like really demoralized. And I was like, oh, I'll just give this one more shot and then I'll, give up and decide that I'm not a writer. But I'm glad I did not give up, and had this amazing opportunity to work with you and bring Burning Sugar to life. And well, not just bring it to life, but also have the chance to sort of refine and curate it into something more than I could have imagined, really.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm so glad that you heard of it. I'm always worried. I'm like, for me on my end, it's kind of like grant submissions. You know how you don't apply for or jobs, you don't apply until like the last day. So I usually for the open call, it's like about 6 months, and I don't get any applications until the last day. But leading up to it, it'll be like, are people going to submit? Like, what if nobody cares about being published anymore? What if everyone's just into zines? Like, I don't know. And Brian will check in on me from Arsenal every so often. He'd be like, did you get any submissions? I'm like, only 2 so far. So I was really glad when yours trickled in. I want to talk a little bit about our process. So, obviously, like, I think, you know, we're part of like similar communities. We have like overlapping, you know, friend circles, but we're mostly strangers when we first started working together. And, you know, there's such a sort of like vulnerability, I can say, as like a writer, when you submit something and then you're working with an editor that you've never met. And like, I think you and I actually spent like maybe 2 or 3 hours doing photos in Vancouver on a rainy day. But I'm curious what it was like for you to work with kind of a stranger on like these very like personal, passionate poems.
Definitely scary at first and a little bit intimidating, you know, to work with someone whose work that I'd already read and really enjoyed and resonated with. And then, you know, I think, yeah, you know, I kind of was a little bit starstruck in the beginning working with you and being like, oh my God, this person is real. I have Vivek's phone number in my phone. This is wild. But yeah, definitely. I mean,
you played it so cool. Like in the photo shoot, you were just like,
no, inside I was like, oh my God. But yeah, definitely it's like already just like as a British person being vulnerable and, you know, talking about my emotions. And I think a lot of the poetry is a lot more personal and vulnerable than I've ever been in anything. And so already that's a very nerve-wracking process to kind of put that all out there. And then, yeah, definitely scary to kind of have that open for critique is but yeah, such an important process, because I think, you know, I was very much, having never had my work edited before, very much coming from the sort of traditional, you know, all I knew about poetry is what I learned in school, but like having you and the folks at Arsenal Pulp Press, you know, encouraged me to play around with format and length and style, and all of those pieces was just such, I think, really what made the difference between kind of the you know, the random pieces I'd cobbled together and actually becoming a collection that works well and flows well and is kind of unique in its own way. So yeah, it took a minute to kind of get over that initial fear and hesitancy, but definitely worth it.
I mean, I'm really glad that you feel that way. And I mean, I always felt like, you know, you always responded to feedback so well, but also, you know, my whole thing is like, you as an author, and I think I probably said this to you a million times, like, trust your gut. Like, you know, you're writing better than anyone else, you know, better than me. Like, yeah. And I think that's always the balance as an outsider coming in, is like not wanting to infringe upon, you know, your style. This is like totally, I'm giving you free permission to say something that might offend me and I won't be offended. I'm very curious, like what the most challenging or most annoying edit suggestions were, where you were just like, fuck you.
Well, I don't think I was ever like, fuck you, but I think, I think we did have a back and forth around the inclusion of the essays in the book. And that was something I was passionate about. And I think you were kind of like, I'm not sure, because, you know, there ended up, I did envision maybe there would be more, but maybe that's a Burning Sugar part 2. But I think, yeah, I think that was a place where, and I think you had empowered me to, you know, stand up for what I want and to like see what I want from this process. So I was like, yeah, you know, this is my book at the end of the day. And that there were things that I wanted to say through essays that I didn't think could be said through poetry. And so, yeah, I'm glad that they ended up in there, but I, of course, really appreciate the different perspectives. But yeah, I think that, and yeah, I mean, just, I wouldn't say it was like I didn't appreciate it, but it was very, very hard for me to get outside of the box in terms of like format. And you were encouraging me to like, you know, what if you like put words over here? And I was like, I'm so attached to, you know, these traditional like, you know, English British ways of writing. And so that was really helpful feedback. And I think, to be honest, I could have pushed myself more, but I was still a bit nervous and still a little bit, you know, I think that's a lifelong process of like decolonizing your mind from, you know, how you learn to do poetry in school. But yeah, that was challenging, but I think really important. And you know, as I continue to write, that's something that's always sort of in the back of my mind, is like, okay, you don't just have to write, you know, from one side of the page to the other. You could be experimental with how it flows and shows up on the page as well.
Totally. And that's what's so beautiful about poetry, right? It's like hard because I think for me, my exposure to poetry was largely like white poetry that has like certain rules and sonnets and rhyme structures and whatnot. And, you know, some of the best advice I got around that was just like throw it in the garbage and just like make it your own, you know. And I was really trying to sort of like, yeah, empower you to do that. But at the same time, like you said, it's like you've grown up with that. And I mean, I think you found a really nice balance. I think one of the things that I was really drawn to outside of your poetry was the letter writing. So you use a lot of letters in the book to talk to a variety of people, like, you know, famous people, intimate people. And I'm just curious, like, was that always part of the vision? Did you always, in like in your early stages, is that, you know, how did the letter writing, like, you know, come about for you as a process?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't one of the very sort of initial pieces, but I think I've always kind of had this desire to, I guess, communicate with, or, you know, be in touch with particularly, you know, inspirational people within, you know, the Black civil rights movement, or, you know, folks who've sort of become symbols, whether through positive things or, you know, harmful things that have happened to them. You know, some of the folks in that I write to are, you know, folks who've been victims of police violence. And I think I'm trying to reach them in a way. And of course they won't reply, but I kind of sometimes imagine that they do. And I think that's been kind of part of my healing process as well, as, you know, as an activist. And, you know, sometimes you just like feel like you're shouting into the void, and you feel like you're just, you know, you're just chanting Black Lives Matter at a brick wall. But I think with this, I'm kind of like, I have somewhere to you know, to focus that energy, and to focus that desire, and that that commitment to, you know, anti-racism and all of those pieces. If I have like a central figure in mind, it feels a lot more grounded, and it feels a lot more rooted. And yeah, it's also just kind of to honor them in ways that they're usually not honored, you know, especially folks like Philando Castile, who you know, I mentioned in the letter to him around how you know, how many non-Black people's deaths end up on YouTube. And I think those folks are never honored in even if they're remembered by mainstream society, they're never honored in a way as beautiful as poetry. So I think that's also something I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, again, that was like, yeah, there's so many favorite parts of the book, but like for me, the letter is just like, there's something about the way it breaks up the poetry that just is just so beautiful and so intimate. And again, it's like, it's so, I know people are using the word generous a lot to describe your book, but there's something really generous about you having a conversation, often with another Black individual, and letting the reader sort of engage in that. So we're sort of like, I'm going to say, why don't we just like open the floor to questions if people want to start typing up questions. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep asking you questions while questions trickle in from all of you. So, I mean, this is sort of like a side. I'm just curious, who was your first letter from, and who was your first letter to, like outside of the book?
Ooh.
Do you remember? Did you ever have like a pen pal? Like, I don't know.
I'm sure I did, but
your first DM?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like when I look back, most of my like late childhood, early adolescence is being on MSN. So I don't know if it was a letter so much as a message where my username was a Kelly Clarkson lyric, but that's still a very important and poignant part of my formation of who I am. But what is coming to mind is, yeah, I mean, just recently I got a letter from my mom, and like she still likes to write letters, and my grandma as well. And that's just always been, you know, I've lived away from home for almost 10 years now. And so that's been a really important like way of keeping in touch, even though of course we WhatsApp and message all the time. So just to sit down and write things out and you know, reflect. And you know, my mom wrote in the, I hope she doesn't mind that I'm airing her insights, but you know, just as I am, as I've expressed, we have a little bit of a hard time with emotional expression. And so she took the time to write a letter about how she felt about the book. And I think in a way that maybe she wouldn't have been able to say if we were face to face, or if we were on like a Zoom chat. So I think that's kind of a nice way to share emotions and express things that maybe we wouldn't say elsewhere. And I always kind of see letters in that way is, you know, these are my kind of deepest, innermost feelings, and I can kind of send it off into the void a little bit. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Okay, so we have some questions. Who are your writing inspirations? How long did it take from submission of manuscript until it was published? Where do you recommend buying it? I'm going to say that check out your local Ottawa indie bookstore. I was told that they're, you know, selling lots of books right now, and we really appreciate you supporting them. Maybe from the publisher end, I will answer the question around submission until published, and then Cicely, if you want to answer who your writing inspirations are. So maybe do you want to go first, and you can answer who your writing inspirations are, or who your writing inspirations were maybe specifically for this book?
Yeah, my favorite book of poetry is Salt by Naira Waheed.
Oh yeah, so good.
Yeah, again, that was sort of the first time that I read like a non-old white dude poem or like book of collection of poetry, and it was just so powerful, but also not overly complex at the same time, very accessible. Yeah, and that really kind of was my entry point into, you know, that was when I first arrived here in Canada, you know, first went to university and started to have all these conversations about feminism and critical race. And I was like, whoa, like you can also have these conversations in art too. It doesn't have to be just in academia or just in theory. And I think that was such a huge inspiration to me in terms of that. I also really, really love Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine.
Oh, so good.
Like, just I think what she does, and that's my kind of favorite kind of, you know, whenever people ask me to, you know, recommend books at the end of workshops and things, I think people are expecting kind of like a how-to guide, but I think you can actually learn just as much or even more from a fictional text or from poetry, because you're able to deeply empathize with people's experiences so much more than maybe a textbook or like a guide. And I think, yeah, what she does with Girl, Woman, Other is you get such a powerful insight into the experience of Black women and Black non-binary people that, yeah, that's a huge inspiration to me. Yeah.
So good. So good. Yeah, I echo those. On the publishing end, I think the open call that Cicely applied for or submitted to was in the spring of 2018. And I think I maybe contacted Cicely in December, I want to say, of 2018. We met in January 2019. So yeah, like their book was selected December 2018, and now we're 2020 fall. So almost 2 years. I mean, certainly 2.5 years since submission to publishing, which is pretty normal in publishing. I think with Taya's book, it was a little bit faster, but I think, you know, for me, I just feel like writing just benefits time. And I think also because it's a new relationship, it felt important to, you know, build our relationship through writing as well. So yeah, okay, lots of great questions here. You like YA fantasy. Now that Harry Potter is off the table for progressive readers, what are your top recommendations?
That's a good question. I really like, what is it called? Sorry, I just have to look at the bookshelf. Oh yeah, it's called A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. It's kind of a reimagining of Alice in Wonderland, but with a Black female protagonist. So that's really fun. I also really like anything by N.K. Jemisin. I wouldn't say that's YA, but it's like amazing fantasy by a Black writer, lots of like queer narratives and lots of like amazing world building, which I think is great. Yeah, R.I.P. Harry Potter, but yeah, I think it's time to move on.
Yeah. Okay. I love the idea of a book that blends poetry with essays and letters. I'm wondering when and how you knew what was going to end up being a poem and what would be an essay. Did you ever start writing in one way and end up writing something else? So did you ever start writing a poem and it ended up an essay, or did you ever start writing an essay and it became a poem? Great question. Thank you.
That is a good question. Yes, in terms of, especially in the middle chapter on art, that just felt like a very different process. And when we kind of decided that each chapter should have a sort of intro, and so I kind of consider those like mini essays, the sort of intro that you see in the art section. One of them I started writing an essay about Khalil Joseph, one of the artists that I met, but it ended up making so much more sense as a poem, just because of like the formatting that I wanted to do with it, and just how personal it was, and how I didn't want to get theoretical, and I didn't want to get too lengthy or too explanatory. I just wanted to kind of give this snapshot of who this person was. And similarly with the letter Dear Selena, that started off as an essay, but again, it was so personal to the artist that I was writing to that I realized that it made much more sense as a letter. So yeah, some of them did kind of ebb and flow between those things.
Beautiful. Can you talk about your writing process? What time of day do you work best? Where do you work best? And P.S. I loved your book. This isn't me. I'm not filtering these questions, but I also loved your book.
Well, it's hard to think because I don't remember what life was like before, but I work better at night usually.
Yeah, I was going to say you're not a morning person, unlike me, with it's like texting you at 5 a.m. and you're just like, I am going to bed right now.
10 hours later. Yeah, I definitely prefer to work at night. I mean, yeah, in an ideal world, as you can see, a lot of the poems and a lot of the pieces are inspired by particular places. So in an ideal world, those are inspiration. I was thinking about starting to work on a new project and was like, do I just like write about different rooms in my house now that I can't go anywhere? But yeah, I love writing in galleries. I love writing outside, just looking at things, being inspired by things. But I guess if I have to stay at home, then yeah, on my couch at night.
Okay, can you tell us, and I think this is such a great question, can you tell us a little bit about your decision to split the themes of the collection? So is it space, art, childhood? I can't remember now. I'm a terrible editor.
Land, art, child.
Right, perfect. Okay, not too bad. And then the collection had such a beautiful trajectory and would love to hear more about the intention.
Yeah, I think we kind of went back and forth with sections. I think we had 4 sections at one point, and then we went back to 3 sections. I think especially the majority of the work started off with what is part 1. And then it was kind of like, do I try to, fit other things in between that, even though they're so distinctive and they're so clearly belong together, that then I was like, okay, this would actually be really cool as sections. And so you can kind of like jump in and out, what you're getting from the section. If you want to travel the world from your living room, you're reading part 1. And then I think part 3 on child is so much more personal. I talk about a lot of, things that have happened to me, my kind of upbringing, which is drastically different from, sort of my view of the world, or, events even experiences that I've had as an adult. So I just kind of felt like delineating them that way allows the reader to kind of experience my lens, but in kind of like different ways, and like engage in different ways as well. And what was the second question?
Like, how did you come up with the order of the poems and themes?
Ooh. Good question. I mean, I think, yeah, the first section was just probably my favorite section, and so definitely wanted to start with that. And I think, yeah, because the last section is so much more personal, I felt like, you have to get to know me through the first 2 parts before you're allowed into that kind of like deeper level that the third part offers, I think.
The other question, we're slowly wrapping up here. So if you have any last questions, maybe if you want to type them up here, this is you, our friends who are watching. Thank you. So one of our last questions here, I really liked, and this is sort of tying back to what you were saying around place, but I really liked the diaspora poem you shared. It really resonated with me. How important was place in your writing? Was it something that helped you curate or order the pieces? And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like, yeah, so important. And I think what I tried to express, not just in the first section, but I think in the whole text, is kind of that that complexity of, I have a lot of privilege as a British person. I've had so many great opportunities to travel, and something that my parents were able to gift me and really valued. but at the same time, there's the complexities of traveling the world in my body. And, you know, just if you look at my passport, you're like, oh yeah, this person can go anywhere. But then the actual experiences that I have in different places really, I think, become a reminder of racism and anti-Blackness and fat phobia and misogyny. And I think the complexity of that privilege and those opportunities kind of marred by the way that systemic oppression and trauma kind of shows up is sort of the underpinning of the whole book. Even the chapters that aren't specifically about travel or about place, I think I'm trying to speak to how and you know, in my work, talking about anti-Blackness specifically is really important to me. And I think I'm always just trying to offer a reminder that anti-Blackness is a global phenomenon. You know, it's experienced by folks in North America. It's experienced by folks when they travel, because of the histories of anti-Blackness as a global project. And I think that was kind of the core takeaway that I want people to receive from this work.
Lovely. Okay, I'm going to take one more audience question. Well, I'm going to offer you one more audience question, and then I'm going to ask you one last question, and I think then we'll wrap up. Does that sound okay for you? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Hi, Kamal. This is such a lovely human being and question. Hello, Vivek and Cicely. Thank you so much for your work. I'm a trans South Asian queer person. Colonialism has defranchised me from my family and them from themselves. The result, it seems to me, is an intergenerational loneliness, a collective loneliness. Loneliness seems like the legacy of colonialism. Cicely, part of why your piece, Dear Diaspora Child, everyone keeps coming back to this one, is so important is because it addresses this loneliness. May I ask about your own spaces of loneliness and if or how your art is a response to it? Thank you for the company of your writing. Lovely question. And yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of you want to talk about your loneliness, but
that is a very, very powerful question, and I'm so glad that piece. Yeah, I've had a couple of folks, you know, say to me that piece is particularly poignant, and I think a lot of us in the diaspora, you know, no matter how many generations removed you are from, you know, your ancestors who were able to celebrate their culture more freely, I think we will feel that in some way. I think, yeah, that idea of loneliness is very deeply connected to colonialism, in the sense that there's so much that has been stripped from us. And I think, you know, when I engage with a lot of, you know, knowledge about my ancestors through reading and through research, but I still feel like I'm coming at it through a white gaze almost. I still feel like an anthropologist, or, you know, somebody who's studying this culture as opposed to somebody who has a deep connection to it. And I think that's deeply painful to me. And I think there's also a lot of shame around the reclamation process in and of itself. And I think that also contributes to that kind of isolation of, sometimes you feel like you're the only one who's going through that experience, or you judge yourself in comparison to your peers who maybe are first generation immigrants, and so have a deeper connection to their culture, obviously then have their own traumas related to migration. But I think we're always just in this state of comparison and this idea of belonging, and especially for myself as a mixed race person, that idea of belonging has, you know, kind of weighed on me for my whole life, of like, you know, you're not Black enough, or you're not white enough, you know, which spaces do you fit into? And I think it kind of it's also connected to that sort of gatekeeping around community, which I think is not specific to culture, can also be in relation to queer communities as well, that kind of gatekeeping of who gets to belong and who doesn't. And I think that really exacerbates the loneliness. And then added to that, a pandemic where we're all feeling disconnection. I think that is, I think that question is so poignant, because it's really, I think a lot of us are in that boat of this desire to, a calling almost to, you know, my grandma, she's white British, and I think, you know, she's kind of come to terms with me wanting to connect more with my African side. And I think at first she was like, I feel like, you know, you're both, I feel like you're leaving me behind. But as I went on this journey, she was like, oh, you feel a calling, and I see that. And I think that's, you know, for me, that kind of connection. You can't put your finger on it, but it's this calling to something before, or something greater, or some other homeland, even if you've never been there. And I think what I wanted to do with Dear Diaspora is let people know that that's okay, even if you've never been there, that you can feel that calling, and it's okay to embrace that in a way that makes sense for you.
Thank you so much for answering that. And thank you again for all of your questions here tonight. I'm going to ask our last question as we slowly wind down here, talking about Burning Sugar, Cicely Belle Blain's debut book of poetry. So you and I went back and forth on the title a couple times, well, many times. And I'm curious if you can just like give us a little bit of insight of how we got to how you got to Burning Sugar, and how are you feeling about the title now that the book is out in the world and people are like waving it on Instagram? Do you feel a connection to it? Are you feeling proud of it? Like, how are you feeling about the title?
Yeah, I feel great. I am very, very happy with the title that we ended up with. I wanted it to be very ekphrastic and very like almost like sensory, and I really wanted people to and I think I wanted that with a lot of the works, is I want people to feel like they're there wherever it is that I'm talking about. And I feel like the title and also the color of the cover is doing that, I hope. And yeah, I feel very strongly about you know, there were so many things that we were playing around with. So I think we had like 50 words we were playing around with. And I think for me, the poem that I read, North Carolina, this kind of, when I first saw that whipping post at a former slave plantation, and imagining, just again going back to that globalness of anti-Blackness, and how, you know, people from my country, Britain, had stolen people from Africa, brought them to the Americas, and just this kind of like this global connection. And then in the art section, I visit the Tate Gallery, which is named Tate after Tate and Lyle, which is a sugar company, and how that gallery, as much as I love it and spent my childhood going there, or at least the building made their money from the sugar industry, which was made from slavery. So it's just like this deep connection between how all of these things are connected, and yeah, but also that like sensory layer to it as well.
Well, thank you so much for your patience with the process, because I think it's such a fantastic title. And thank you so much, Cicely. Congratulations on a beautiful, beautiful book. And I want to thank all of you so much for tuning in wherever you are and spending your evening with us. I want to thank the Ottawa Public Library and the Library Archives of Canada also for being partners for tonight's event. I want to thank, of course, the House of VS Books, Arsenal Pulp Press, and on the amazing team over there for all of their work on this book. And last but not least, I want to thank the Ottawa Writers Festival. You know, I've been doing a lot of reflecting, because like I said, this year is my 10-year anniversary of being in the publishing industry. And, you know, it took a really long time to get invites to festivals. And, you know, festivals, now that I have the privilege of doing them, I see the ways in which being at festivals can make such a huge difference for writers, in terms of like just being on a panel or being in the same room with someone like Dion Brand. And as an emerging artist, or, you know, as a new artist, those opportunities are few and far between. And Ottawa Writers Festival was one of the first festivals to invite me, and since then have been so supportive of not only me, but other authors who I admire and who I'm working with. So I just want to thank you so much for the amazing work that you're doing to like bring a cross section, because I think for so long a lot of festivals have just focused on a particular kind of author, and I love the programming that you consistently are committed to. So thank you so much. And on that note, just want to plug Ottawa Writers Festival's next sort of big event, Monday at 7:30, Among the Volunteers and Refugees on Lesbos, with Stephen Hayton, winner of Governor General Award for Poetry and 4 National music. My own background's kicking in here. 4 Gold National Magazine Awards. Thank you so much, everyone.